right, so maybe we should get started. How about that? Great, well, thank you so much everyone for joining. I'm so excited to speak with you all about your questions in virtual experiences and stage management. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Just to let you know, this meeting will be recorded. And this format is meant to be an open discussion, so I'll have a little bit to share to get us started, but please feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, and you can unmute yourself to jump in, and the chat will also be open for comments. So I'm Megan Easton. I'm the events manager at Qualcomm Institute. I've worked at UCSD for a little over a year, but I've worked in the events field at other higher education institutions like Claremont McKenna College and San Diego State. Like many of you, I'm sure, when the stay-at-home order was issued and gatherings were banned on campus, many of my department's events were canceled, and I began to explore the multitude of platforms and options for virtual events. There was a learning curve, but I developed some good practices that really help out on the back end that give the audience the best experience. A few of those are to clearly define the roles and responsibilities, to practice the pre-show run-through and rehearsals, and those are vital to a smooth event, and backup plans for various scenarios. And having someone that's really handy with audiovisual and IT is always a good idea. And then security plans. I know that there's various platforms out there and they all have different options for those. So one of the most distinct transition points from in-person to virtual was the ability to help keep the event on time. In person, you can hold, your 2-minute warning signs, you can have warning lights, and even have moderators step in. With virtual events, especially events with many speakers, you rely on the chat feature or other back-end communication channels to catch their attention. So what I've figured out was that it's really important when I do events to stress that the presenter should keep a close eye on those back-end communication channels. And there's a lot that goes into the behind-the-scenes work for each event. And one of the goals of this discussion and the Events Council is to learn how to help each other. I'm going to open it up now to questions, thoughts, experiences. Is there someone that wants to share first?
So what do you use for your back-end communication?
So for my back-end communication channels, it really depends on which platform we're using. And we tend to use Zoom a lot. So one of the things that we found that works really well is to keep the chat open for all the panelists and us on the back end so that we can send messages like you have 2 minutes left or we're running a little late. Make sure to keep your answers short. And you can also private message on that communication.
Platforms have you been using besides Zoom?
So there's Zoom. We have used another third-party event platform called Evia. We've looked into Hopin. There is Glisser. There is, let's see, I know, people can also jump in the chat too, might be a good idea if you've used any other platforms that worked well.
What was the first one you mentioned?
Evia, E-V-I-A. And Evia kind of takes the virtual stage manager, so they do that on their end, and you're there as more of a overall organizer. So they do have the ability to have a waiting room for all the presenters, and then they stream those in using another video device. So you get more of a tailored lower thirds presentation look, just like we saw this morning in the webinar. Has anyone noticed any differences or similarities from in-person to remote events? Any hardships or positive things? And everyone can feel free to turn their video on as well. We want this to be an open discussion. See some familiar faces out there. Hi, Melanie.
I'm raising my hand.
Great.
I was just thinking that if we all thought that we'd be having to do this frequently, especially like the way that I can't remember the name of the leaders from the first portion of this webinar, but that we would all that we would all benefit from like broadcasting school or or some techniques, because I think there's a lot of things that don't translate the same when you're in person that if you're on camera. Just little body movements, where to look when another person's talking, things like that. So I mean, that might be something maybe that event planning could maybe help us with. Maybe that should be something we should get some trainings on, since we can't all go to broadcasting school. But
that's a great idea and a great thought. Some of what I do for my pre-show run-throughs and rehearsals is that I make sure all the presenters come on, and if they need their lighting fixed, we can adjust that before the event starts, make sure their audio is working properly, and kind of go through a list, make sure you have some water, make sure, everyone in your space knows that you're doing a live webinar, because, you can't always control dogs barking or people coming in and out. But that is important, Melanie, so that it comes across as more of a polished look.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How about anyone else? Is there really important roles that you identify for yourself and the other backstage team?
Hi, so I'm Cindy Wong. I'm with the Supercomputer Center. And so recently, as we've had events and whatnot, we've learned that having a pre-day is always helpful, especially with any technical things. Especially when we've done webinars where we have one presenter, we'd ask them kindly, do you have another time you could spare for like 15 to 30 minutes, just to make sure that Zoom works for them, audio works just fine, because there's all these security features that Zoom now has that kind of may prevent them from joining. So we've learned that that's really helpful. And when we have a larger group, like we recently held a hackathon earlier this year, it was like around maybe 80 people. We had a full prep day to make sure all the students or grad students, postdocs, anybody who's involved, even the instructors and the moderators, we're all on the same page as well. So with the week after that, for the full day of all day Zoom, Slack, that prep day really allowed to avoid any issues, crossing fingers anyways, through that entire process.
I agree. That's so important. And it's also really important for all of the main players to feel comfortable with what they're doing and how to use the technology, because sometimes you have issues, or sometimes you need to figure things out a little bit. For me, I've done so much practice with all the different options and features. I think that's the most important thing that you can do. And like you said about the Zoom security, I think they're always changing. So they are adapting, and there's new features and different features. So keeping your eye out on that is important as well. What type of events is everyone doing? Is it mainly conferences? Is it a lot of meetings? I know for us, we've done a little bit of everything. One of the most fun events I think I helped with was Process Palooza. I don't know if anyone was able to join, but it was really fun, and there was different presentations, so you got a little taste of everything, and then there was a live Q&A portion, and I think the interactive element with the live Q&A was really important to keep audiences engaged virtually.
I can share some of the events that we've been working on. So hello everyone, my name is Kimberly Epperson. I work with special events and protocol, and we've kind of been tag teaming with various departments. So we have also been working with Megan's team on helping with back-end virtual stage managing for the town halls. I'm not sure if some of you have attended those, but we did a faculty town hall, the staff town hall, which had about 2,000 attendees. So that was super nerve-wracking on the back end. But I think what helps with that is definitely communicating through chat. And if something comes up, that it's okay and we're all in this new world together. But we definitely have lots of practices beforehand. Megan is great at just doing the run of show. We have a lot of leadership on those town halls, so it's important to have all of that written out and shared with all the leadership beforehand, and then just walk through it on the day of. And then some other events that I'm working on is the staff summer celebration. Usually, I'm sure you all are aware that it's in person and we like to get outdoors and have some fresh air. Unfortunately, this year we are going virtual, and it's going to be a 3-day virtual experience with different sessions going on, from meeting with affiliate groups and different Zoom meetings. And then we're also going to have virtual events similar to social sessions, if any of you have participated in that. But there's trivia, we're gonna have a craft making demo, and then we're gonna have a talent show. So I'm plugging that. If you know anyone that is a musician or any type of talent that they would like to share and come on for this Zoom session, we're doing that as well. So for that event, we are doing a call out for on a Google sheet. We're asking those who want to participate to fill out a Google form, and then we're also going to have rehearsals with those performers, and then do it just as a Zoom meeting so staff can engage and interact and listen to each other. So that's one of the big ones we're working on right now. We do reach out to a lot of leadership to record messages, so that's been all through Zoom. We haven't done any in person at this time, but so Zoom webinars and Zoom meetings has definitely been our platform.
Absolutely, and you bring up another good point about recordings. I do feel lucky to have AV as part of the QI team, so it's really easy for us to do pre-recordings if that's an element that you want to insert into your event. If a speaker is not able to be there for the live show, or if it's just something that's pretty complicated that needs to be pre-recorded, that's always a good option. It does get a little bit more complicated when you're trying to share that through something such as Zoom. You lose maybe a little bit of the quality, but there's definitely other options.
I'm the production manager for Art Power. Haven't done anything virtually yet, but all of our content will be online.
Your audio is just cutting out a little bit. Do you mind repeating that?
Let me try to speak up a little bit. I'm the production manager for Art Power. We have not done any online presentations yet, but all of our fall presentations will be online. And I was going to ask, what did you find most helpful in terms of training yourself on Zoom? Just do they have the videos on their website, or did you find things on YouTube, or how did you go about finding things to educate yourself the most?
Sure, great question. So I think the Zoom help tutorials, and they have, I believe, live demonstrations maybe every week. Those are very, very helpful and very detailed. Start with that. And I think one of the most helpful things is just to be connected in this virtual webinar world. Attend as many as you can and pick out things that you say, oh, this works really well, or, you know, this kind of wasn't as successful, maybe there's a better way to do it. I think that's definitely one of the most important things. And to be connected with this events council. And I know there's another, one of the other platforms, or it's not a platform, but BizBash. I'll put it in the chat. They host a lot of webinars that are specifically for event planners. And so they are able to bring up a lot of different resources. That's something that's very helpful that I look into. I attended one just the other day. How about anyone else? Is there anything that you found helpful in kind of training yourself and looking for different options with Zoom? I know one other thing for me too was just practice, just doing them, starting small, going through it, and, you know, like Kimberly mentioned, practice, practice, practice. Use your team. Make your own little webinar and try out the different features, try out the recordings, see what you like and see what works well.
Are you only using the Zoom features, or are you running through OBS or some other program?
So we've mostly just been using Zoom. we're finding that a lot of people are really familiar with it, and especially with doing something that's planned in a short time period, it just works well because it's really easy to use. And using something like OBS does require a lot more unique skill set and more rehearsal time.
I'm gonna actually backpack off that and agree fully of what she said in terms of the Zoom tutorials on their site are helpful, but of course there's always some things that your events are unique in its own way. So you kind of have to play around with all the features that you need to make sure that they work throughout the entire time. I have like 3 devices that I play with all by myself. I have to rename them all to make sure it's not the same name over Cindy Wong, Cindy Wong, Cindy Wong, to make sure that like the breakout rooms work, because that's kind of challenging as well. Making sure that you have like a session with your own colleagues who are part of the planning session to make sure that they understand it and also are familiar with the tools as well, so that you're not the only one who may just have like a mental breakdown at that moment that something's not working. It's like, obviously it's just technical, but you know, it does put a drain on you emotionally during the exact moment, like, okay, this is not working, what's going on? So you have a backup who can like assist there. But YouTube videos are somewhat helpful as well. It's all about just kind of finding the right ones that would work best for you. And chatting, like right here, having this open session and discussing and hearing other people's opinions and thoughts of it as well is also great.
That's perfect. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I see in the chat, Boo put in that they've been working on the Associated Students events. DIY and cooking sounds really cool. That would be a great event to attend. And they said that utilizing the post-event survey feature has been really helpful. We do that as well. There's a feature in Zoom where you can have a post-event survey populate right after the attendee leaves the meeting. And we're finding that that works the best to collect the survey response rather than putting that in a post-event communication. Zoom also, just to put in there, they have really responsive analytics as well. So especially if you use the Zoom registration process, you can collect a lot of really good information from the attendees, and it saves the Q&A and the chat module. You can record to the cloud. So it's a really dynamic platform. I know in some of the other groups I worked with, they had some security concerns. I know that it's such a new thing for everyone to transition pretty much every meeting, every interaction virtually. Zoom webinar and Zoom meetings are different, and they do have different levels of security. Just like this meeting, you went to a waiting room first. That's one layer that we can do. And with the UCSD Zoom Pro accounts, you have different levels where you can, if you're using the Zoom registration feature, you can restrict it to those with a UCSD email only. So I find that that helps a lot as well. Has anyone had any other security concerns or issues on that topic?
So for myself, we've had folks who are non-UCSD folks, and most of the time they have worked just fine, but there are those that don't work. And so the security feature wherein you have to either disable and enable people who have a Zoom account, the risk of disabling that allows potential Zoom bombers, you know? So we always advise folks when they join to rename themselves on the chat to make sure, in Zoom, so that we know to identify that they are legit folks who registered or are attending, and those who don't unfortunately respond to our chats, like, oh, who is this? Could you please change your name? We will warn them and let them know that we're going to be kicking them off, or, you know, we don't want to take the risk. We fortunately haven't had any issues, but taking precautions is always an extra thing to do, especially when you have to disable that feature. on Zoom.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And yeah, a really good security feature. I know we've worked with some other non-UCSD speakers as well, and you do have to disable that feature if they want to be admitted into the webinar. And then just kind of the basic features of webinar versus meetings. Webinar, you do have a lot more control of who is on the screen, and meetings, you do have somewhat control where you can, you know, mute all and have their videos off, but then you can't control whether they have put their video on or not. Yeah, Melanie.
I have a question. So do you, Megan, get involved in writing the scripts for every aspect when you do like a town hall what's involved in your role of being the virtual stage manager?
Sure. So in my role, I tend to not work on the programmatic script. I leave that to the event organizers, but I help with the timeline. And I think that's a really important feature to make sure there's enough in the script for housekeeping, to make sure those features are highlighted of what you're doing with the event, and then timed out in a realistic timeline, because, you know, if you have 15 speakers for an event, they're not going to be able to give half-hour presentations. And then any kind of notes or housekeeping in the conclusion. So I'm mostly involved in the logistics and programmatic elements of the script, not so much the content.
Okay. But for the content though, I'm learning that I can tell that when they've scripted in certain things, because they do these cues to each other. And I've noticed when they do, on the ones that I've seen that have done it, I seem to be looking at everything with a really kind of a critical, not a mean eye, but, you know, just from kind of a critique mind, when they have planned it out, it seems a lot more comfortable than otherwise. There's some clunkiness to it. So I think writing a good script is probably really essential.
And I think having those rehearsal sessions and actually going through the script and rehearsing where you see the problem points and where you can kind of do little fixes along the way, that's really important.
Yeah, missing content or things like that. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I can add on to the script. I know for previous events councils, no shame in just writing out your full script and reading it off of your computer and just making eye contact with the camera. It really helps you to keep on time and just to really emphasize the points that you want to make. Especially for me, if I get really nervous, then I rely on that script 100%. So it's a really good tool.
I agree.
Hi, it's Darlene. I could add in too, and you might have talked about it, but I think practicing is huge. Adrian and I, we practice like all the time. We were here on Monday practicing. We practice when Megan and Kimberly and I work on the town hall. So I think practicing is really key to a successful webinar meeting.
Absolutely. And I found that when I worked with the Process Palooza team, it was really helpful. We kind of thought our rehearsal was just going to be a short rehearsal to go over logistics, but we found that the speakers were wanting to actually go through the full script. And if that's what helps make the event really smooth, then that's the best thing. So we ended up extending our rehearsal time to quite a bit. And I know some speakers, it's easier to find time than others, especially if you have a large group. But, you know, if you can make a few times throughout the week where you can have different speakers join in at different time periods even, that would be helpful.
I have one tip that I was just thinking about when I was setting this meeting up for when you share your screen. I'm sure some of you have had to do the virtual stage managing in the back end, but one tip that I realized, if you're sharing your screen but you need to get out and do something else, you could pause share, and those who are on the meeting will only be able to see what you've paused. So if you've already had it full screen on that slide, you can go out, put the music on, or if you need to chat with someone through email, that's something that's helped me because I only have my laptop. I don't have two monitors. I've heard that if you have a monitor, that helps a lot too. You could do something on one side and then change it on your other monitor. So that was one tip that I've been doing. I'm not sure if Megan does it differently, but that helps me a lot because managing the music on the back end or managing chat and Q&A, that's helped. So it goes smoothly and no one sees the hiccups.
Absolutely. And that's perfect. That brings up another point in the different roles for backstage management. When I run events, I really like to have two people. One person is running, the PowerPoint and the media. And then if I'm running the other administrative, like making sure people are in and out, their videos on and off, that those two roles are covered. And then there's other stage managers that are keeping track of time and monitoring the chat, speaking with panelists to make sure that they have the notes that they need, and then everyone has their different roles, and I think that runs an event really smoothly.
So has everyone been managing production events from their houses on their own Wi-Fi?
I don't know. I'm having a little trouble hearing you again. I don't know if you can speak up, please. Sorry.
Okay, one more time. Has everyone so far managed these from home, or has anyone been going on campus to use the campus Wi-Fi or direct internet? And has it been okay just doing this from your home Wi-Fi?
For my team, we've all been doing it from home. We haven't really experienced any problems. If you're using Zoom, you're using Zoom's bandwidth. So that's also brings up another point of having a backup person too. So if for some reason I drop out, then I have, Kimberly to back me up, and she has all the same material so that she can just jump right on it in case that happens. But we generally haven't had any problems with that. Sometimes maybe a speaker will be in a spotty area with their internet and the video or audio might not come in as clearly, but overall it seemed to go pretty well. Does anyone else have any other experiences?
I'd like to chime in. Sorry, my camera's not on right now. Rosalie from University Centers. I will say during this whole time going remote, I have been blacklisted twice already by the university. And to get that going, ITS, it took 6 hours for ITS to recover me to be able to go back on. So definitely believe in the backups, having like another point of contact, just because with all of that said, like, yes, my internet's working fine, but just having my Wi-Fi IP blacklisted prevented me from even getting to the basic of checking my email.
Goodness. Yeah, that's very important.
It wasn't fun, but it does happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that because you're functioning off a VPN?
Not specifically. I was told was it's because multiple devices using my Wi-Fi IP. There's multiple devices, and not all devices are running virus scans. So even though my computer that I'm using is virus scanning, there are multiple other devices that are using the same Wi-Fi. Could have been my partners, or just, we just have a lot of devices, a lot of things tack onto Wi-Fi. So it wasn't up to date with scan, therefore it blacklisted our Wi-Fi IP.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you have neighbors using your Wi-Fi, you need to make sure they're scanning too.
Well, I think we have time for one more question, or anyone that has any closing thoughts, any experiences, good or bad.
Yeah, I have, hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm from the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department. One thing I think that has been the most maybe quote unquote traumatizing thing about this whole process is when we had our webinar for Transfer Triton Day, our faculty member who's leading the presentation, the slides just weren't loading on his computer. So he asked me if he could just have remote access to my screen and put the PowerPoint on my screen. And what I didn't realize is that I still can control the slideshow also. So I was clicking and it was moving forward, and that kind of messed him up. And so just like what Megan was saying about having set roles, I just really want to like back that up and affirm that, like, because like that person shouldn't have been me if I'm like managing everything. So yeah, just one thing I wanted to share too, I've been using Ecamm which is another live streaming software. And I'll show you, it gives me the ability to like put my logo on my screen. If you can see, I have the logo up there. And so that's been a pretty cool tool to use also.
That's fantastic. I really like that. I'm going to write that down.
Is that free?
It's not free and it's only for Mac users. But the yearly subscription is pretty affordable. I can put info in the chat or
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
So to backpack off the PowerPoint slide that Chelsea had mentioned, I think sending it to someone, a copy of it to someone else to lead instead of having remote control, which obviously may have every other access to what your screen is good, because we had that possible issue as well. So they send 3 people the extra slides. So when it goes on, they say next and someone else can control it without having to do the remote control situation.
Absolutely. And I've actually had that same experience, Chelsea. So that's why we kind of developed the 2-person rule. And thank you for putting that in the chat. We'll definitely check that out. Well, that concludes the Events Council meeting for today. Thank you so much for participating. I'm glad we had the opportunity to engage in some great conversations this morning. I really hope that we can get together like this again. It's really nice to see some familiar faces and to have a space to share ideas with everyone. So I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.